Many of you can recognize the beautiful young lady next to me, Joanne Colan, who is the anchor of Rocketboom. For those of you who have not been to rocketboom.com, you are missing something very interesting because Joanne does a 3-minute video blog about, well, sometimes about the news. Occasionally. Sometimes about just whatever is in your mind, I guess.
That happens as well, yes.
Sometimes things that people suggest to you. They email you, suggest about things that you ought to cover.
Yep, we love those.
And sometimes it's quirky. Quite often it is. Occasionally it's serious. You went to Israel. That was a fairly serious report that you did.
Yeah.
You did something on global warming I saw recently that was fairly serious. But you put it out in a palatable manner. One of the ones that I thought that was brilliant, actually, simple, brilliant in its simplicity, was on Earth Day when you decided to show people how we waste things on Earth Day. And you opened a package of something that you bought at Office Max or Staples or something, and it took you about almost a full 3 minutes to open it up, and here's all this junk for this one little whatever it was.
It was a printer cartridge.
Printer cartridge.
Yep.
And it was wrapped, and the wrapping was wrapped, and the wrapping was wrapped, and that wrapping was wrapped, and probably the wrapping, all the shrink wrap and all that costs more than the cartridge, for them to produce. Plus, you had all this crap to throw away, and you didn't even lecture anybody. You didn't interview anybody about, we have a serious problem, with pollution. And, you just kind of demonstrated it. Is that the beauty of what you're doing at Rocketboom?
I think the beauty of Rocketboom largely is that anything can happen in those 3 minutes. And we do have a structure, and we do have particular themes that we stick to and so on. But I think we're always trying to reinvent that, format and come up with something that's different. And, there's just tons of things going on in the world. And it's difficult really to sort of prioritize things and say, well, we know we should definitely report on this. So at the end of the day, it kind of, is a very fresh brainstorm session that you get on air when you watch Rocketboom almost.
So you, like me, came from the mainstream, as they call it, the old media, as we kind of look at it down our noses. You were a VJ at MTV in Europe. You did a host of things at the BBC, and you, like me, made the big leap into the new media. What motivated you?
And backtrack further, I also did radio, and I can tell that you've done a lot of radio because you have that fantastic radio voice.
Oh, thank you.
I love it.
Thank you. My background actually is print, and the first time I did radio many years ago, I put the headsets on. A buddy of mine took me to his radio station. It was a daytimer, He said, you ought to do radio. And I said, I don't know. Come on over. And so one night we went over there. There's nobody there, of course, and I put the headsets on. And, of course, like we're right now, people there probably don't realize it, but we actually hear ourselves in the headsets. And I started laughing my butt off. He said, why are you laughing? I said, that's what I sound like, because you hear with your inner ear, but people hear with their outer ear, and so it's a different. So I didn't even know most people don't really realize what they sound like, And I just said, I can't do this because I'll laugh constantly. But obviously I got over my shyness.
I think that the really freeing, uninhibiting thing about radio is that that no one can see you, and you've really got to communicate, and you only have your voice to rely on. And I think it just feels fabulous to know that you've got to be able to get all of your facial expressions and hand gestures through your voice, which is what people are listening to, and it's such a great medium. It really
We're rooting it here, with this video thing that we're doing on Pal Talk. It's interesting. Opie and Anthony do their show, both their free show and their XM Satellite radio show are simulcasted on Pal Talk, and they're very big into having the cameras in the studio and kind of pulling away the curtains so people can see what really goes on in the background, and their fans just love it. But Ron and Fez, who are also shock jocks, they like what you just described. They like the allure, nobody knowing what they really look like, and so they're on Pal Talk, but they don't want cameras in the studio, So it's
they don't. No, I remember one party that people were giving out. I think it was around Christmas time, and people were giving out sort of themed Chinese crackers, except they weren't proverbs and things. They were just kind of gimmicky quotes and different things. And ancient quotes. I remember opening mine and it said, "You have a fabulous face for radio."
That's what they say about folks in radio. Now you now are comfortable with the whole use of the internet and your face being out there, and how many people view you on a daily basis? Do we know?
We do kind of know. I mean, it's hard to give out those
Secret.
figures.
Secret.
It's not, but there's just very, very numerous and complex ways of tracking exactly what kind of audience traffic we have. But I think it varies, you know, from the figure that's always given is around 300,000 viewers a day. I think that fluctuates. I think some days, you know, we just had the last few weeks of August. Of course, that's not peak time for people to be on the internet. At least I hope it's not, because they should be out enjoying the good weather and so on. But yeah, and the audience, you know, sometimes I think it's been in excess of 500,000 for a particular episode. So, you know, it does have but it's up there. I mean, it's quite high considering that it's a video blog. That's considered to be sort of in the top numbers, I think.
Right, and so you're starting to have a little bit of influence out there, aren't you? And in the public debate about issues. So do you get into some of the things? Like me, it's a worldwide audience, so we tend to be a little too U.S.-centric sometimes, especially when you're talking about the war in Iraq and who's running for president of the United States. But do you touch on those kinds of issues?
We do touch on those things. I think at the very beginning, I think people were a bit shocked, saying, wait a minute, you know, writing in and sending their comments from their own computer. Who's this English girl all of a sudden on an American video blog talking about not necessarily just British and European politics, but also talking about what's happening here on the domestic front. And I think we benefit from being in New York. We have that sense when we're out in the street that we're in a very metropolitan, very international city. You don't feel British or American necessarily. You know, it's kind of all part and parcel of the same thing. But it's true. You have to be sensitive to your audience. And I got a really good taste for that when I was working for MTV, based out of London, because our feed went to numerous countries around all kinds of different parts of the world. And so you sort of are, you know, you're tuned into the fact that what you say will be taken one way by one audience in one particular country in a completely different way, you know, somewhere else on the world.
Trust me, I'm pretty strong in my opinions. I'm not an ideologue, but I let people know how I feel about various issues. And boy, do they come back at me. And I got to tell you, some of the times people say, that Gary, he's such a neocon. And other times he's just, you know, he's a liberal, you know, because I don't have him, you know, I'm politically ecumenical, you know.
Right.
And
you're analytical, so you don't necessarily.
Right, I'm analytical. Right, exactly. So, but the thing is, you're right. You know, people will attack you from all sides.
Yeah.
You know, if you're doing controversial things. So, we're going to grab you, by the way. And the audience doesn't know this, but we're making this announcement today. You're going to actually host a couple of brand new shows here on Pal Talk.
I know, isn't that cool? Well, you've kind of set the tone, obviously, having your show here since October, is it?
October,
Okay.